All right.
Well,
Then without further ado, our last speaker today then is Tomas Diaz from Karagozian Case, speaking to security mitigation assessment of risk and threats, soft targets, and crowded places. Tomas?
great. Thank you, Chris. So we're excited to kind of talk through our application. And so we'll jump right in, and I'm looking forward to any questions at the end. So securing soft targets and crowded places is easy to think of like a farmer's market or any venue that doesn't have a built-in sort of security apparatus with it. These are easily accessible to a large number of individuals, and so they are attractive terrorist targets. It's the DHS's priority to, of course, protect these locations due to their vulnerability. There are different types of categories of these ST-CPs. So there's the kind of outdoor areas, there are indoor areas, and so the variety of different places is one of the unique challenges in trying to build a toolkit that can offer and mitigate against these kind of threats. So the smart application, which we'll be talking about today, really can enable security professionals to kind of quickly generate and view these types of environments, and also allow them to use their mobile device to collect further data, depending where the site is that they wish to kind of analyze and secure. We leverage a number of different technologies in this, so we'll look at how we're doing that and the different aspects. There's different type of threat modules that we'll talk about, and we'll talk about how kind of this new cutting edge technology can be used to help mitigate and get a more informed kind of image of the scene. So I think it's important to first just kind of think about what is currently being done and who is responsible for securing these soft targets in crowded places. So we of course have the U.S. government and all the different agencies. As mentioned, DHS has a desire to protect these places, but we also have many different people on the private side, security professionals, the event planners who actually throw events at these places, insurers that are insuring these places for these types of threats, and then the stakeholders who own them. And so we have different kind of people with different sort of needs, and SMART really can be useful to all of these different groups. So what is currently being done? You really have two kind of options. For larger venues, they have the ability to hire security professionals, and this is, of course, is cost prohibitive. They might only do this once, but it also locks them into a configuration of how that venue is set up, and may not make it as flexible if the configuration changes. For smaller venues, which is really where I think there's a lot of interest and ability to provide actual meaningful results to, is that there's still a lot of reliance on local authorities, so police and fire, but sometimes nothing may be done, and sometimes people are using kind of best estimates, rules of thumb that may not be entirely correct. And so we'll talk about how not only can we help these larger venues, but really the unique challenges for these smaller venues and how to take advantage of them. So when we kind of look at those two different types of individuals, the larger venues and the smaller venues, it's helpful to first think about what would be the desired kind of application, how would it work, what tools would be provided. So the first one that we think is very important is we don't want to burden the user on supplying lots of data. So ideally, the user should be able to get first pass on results with very minimal data input that they themselves have to enter into the system. So really, it's just identifying that location wherever they want to start their analysis. Now, at the same time, we don't want to restrict people who have the ability and time to gather more data. It's definitely crucial. And so We also want that ability to add additional data when it's available. So it also needs to be a simple user face, easy to use, should be relatively quick, and I'm talking in the order of minutes to actually run a full analysis. And it should be scalable, so number of users shouldn't affect the performance. So once a user's identified a location, the next thing to do is just identify the threat. And so for this first iteration of this application, we have 3 built-in main threats: blast, vehicle ramming, and active shooter. Once those threats have been identified, the user should then be able to quickly identify the results and make actionable recommendations off those results. And that really is driven by the fact that you can visualize those results very quickly. So Smart's approach, when we look at the different capabilities, is a GIS environment generation tool. What I mean by that is that we can take any place in the world and generate a 3D environment of that space. And then using that virtualization of the environment, we can run different threat vulnerability assessment modules against it. And active shooter, blast, vehicle ramming, and some aspects of evacuation. We also then use machine learning for object detection to assist with the data collection aspect of this. We want to reduce the labor needed for any individual who's on site and trying to collect more data to include into this virtual world. And so we use machine learning to help with that, identifying which objects we believe are the most critical for the analysis. And then there's an on-site data acquisition aspect here. Very simple to use, where a user just uses their phone and tags individual items in the real world. Those positions are saved and then able to be used in the analysis further downstream. So capabilities. So the first, as mentioned, is generating these 3D environments in seconds. So all we need is a lat long, and we'll be able to pull in a building representation, road network, along with the satellite image of that space. Additionally, if available, and it isn't a necessary component, but if there is a person that's on site, there's a mobile device that would allow them to gather and generate additional on-site data. Once that world is kind of set, the user can then iterate and test different types of threats and view those results. So we can look at a blast analysis and understand if the user wants to look at, say, window damage or structural damage. They can kind of choose through those options and view the different contours against the actual buildings. One of our aspects that it's a little bit newer is this vehicle vector analysis. So because our virtual world includes the road networks, we can then simulate vehicles on those road networks to understand kind of the impact of certain paths in that area or around the area that you wish to secure, and then allow the user to change those paths, perhaps closing roads or adding bollards, and seeing how that would affect the vehicle ramming analysis. Active shooter is another module that allows an individual to kind of place vantage points in a scene and then identify kind of how severe that vantage point would be for a density of people, for the shots fired, and so options there to kind of set that analysis. And then a evacuation radius for different charges. So being able to quickly identify how far away you need to clear a zone due to a specific charge size. And then you can easily view this in kind of this 3D environment. So when we compare this to other applications, Smart's strengths are in the fact that there's very little upfront labor needed. There's minutes to kind of complete this assessment. You can view the results as full 3D models and kind of quickly gather the entire scene. The level of detail is very high, enough that we can use kind of AR, augmented reality, to project these results onto a desktop and view the results there. And then we're using a lot of technology to derive these threat modules and the generation of these scenes, both on kind of the machine learning side, but also on the mobile device and the desktop. And when we look at the other approaches, so security professional approach and the federal government approach, we find that in terms of labor, time, and kind of cost, they all are going to be a bigger burden on that user just to get results quickly. So how did we get here? What is our kind of history? So we completed a phase 1, which was about a 6-month effort just to show feasibility. That gave us kind of a readiness level of 5 to 6, so 10 being totally ready, 0 still being in very research level. And so we then just completed our phase 2, which allowed us to kind of complete this beta release, and that's what's showing generating those images that we've seen today. And that's gotten us to about 7 or 8. And so our next steps are to kind of get a production release ready. And so that we are aiming for around 6 months, and then thinking about the version 2, which would include other threat modules, and then just more resources for the user to be able to control and manipulate that scene. So K&C is really a lot larger than just this application, and it's really just through the combination of our previous work that we were able to include it. And so starting kind of from the top left, we have always been in kind of the applied research and testing. And so we do have all of the empirical results for doing different types of analysis. We are those security professionals that we showed that will do this assessment over a longer period of time. And so we have all that data that has fed into how we approach this problem, which is doing things much faster. We also have a prototype and production development area where we're actually manufacturing different kind of protective devices and different things to secure different types of structures or vehicles. That has kind of led us into the protective design and vulnerability assessment, which again is those professional security engineers that I've kind of mentioned through this. And then we have a very big modeling and simulation department, which is doing these kind of high fidelity calculations. These are calculations that take weeks, sometimes even longer to run. And so all of that is kind of culminated, all that knowledge is culminated into the smart application. And that's kind of what has led us here. So why are we kind of honored to speak to this group, and why do we think this group has a lot of kind of synergy that possibly could happen? We are at a point where we think the tool is ready for field testing, and it's really a question of trying to get it into the right hands to the right people. We want to get feedback on what works, what doesn't work, what could be added, what needs to be adjusted for this application to be as useful as possible. As mentioned, that this takes seconds to generate this world and only minutes to run all of these analyses. So as a result, we can see it being within the tool chain of what certain first responders might want access to. And what we're really looking for is just identifying people who are interested in trying it out and getting some honest feedback. And so that's one of the main drivers of coming here today and kind of talking through this application. So just to kind of close, I wanted to, of course, thank everyone attending and listening to this. If there are any questions, or if you want to schedule a demo and you want to see this actually in live action, feel free to reach out to myself at Diaz and KNC SE.com, or Pedram, who's really been leading the protective design side of things, who is also, I believe, on this call. So thank you very much.